Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by rolling green hills, lived a boy named John. His life had once been filled with warmth and love when his parents were both alive, but after his mother passed away, something changed. His father, Henry, a kind man, remarried, hoping to bring stability and care to their broken home. However, the woman he chose, Agatha, harbored a heart as cold as winter. Agatha treated John with wickedness from the moment she entered their lives. Her kindness reserved only for her own son David, a boy around John's age. John had grown used to the harsh treatment. Agatha forced him to do all the house chores, scrubbing the floor, tending to the animals, and cooking meals, while David fooled around, basking in his mother's endless affection. At night, John slept on a hard, cold floor in the attic, while David slept in a large bed with the softest sheets. Agatha made sure to give David the best of everything, while John received nothing but hate. "Why do you even bother staying here?" she would say anytime she sees him, her sharp eye following John's every move. "You should have gone with your mother. No one wants you here." John never responded to her wicked words. Instead, he kept his head down, quietly going about his tasks, finding solace only in the memories of his mother and the love he had once shared. His father, Henry, was too ill to intervene, bedridden for months now. He remained unaware of the extent of Agatha's wickedness, believing she cared for the family in his absence. John, determined not to add to his father's burden, endured the abuse in silence. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Agatha's hatred for John grew. She began to see him not just as a nuisance, but as a threat to the comfortable life she planned for herself and David. "If only he were gone," she said darkly one evening, her mind thinking of bitter thoughts, "then everything would be perfect." Her resentment turned into something more dangerous. Agatha decided it was time to get rid of John once and for all. That very night, as she prepared dinner, she poured a deadly poison into John's bowl of stew, making sure it was undetectable. Her heart raced with anticipation. Soon, the boy who had been thorn in her side would be gone, and no one would ever suspect a foul play. She set the table, her hand steady, though her heart pounded with excitement. John sat down at the usual place at the far end, while David, obvious to his mom's wickedness, plopped down at the head of the table, smug as ever. Agatha placed a poison bowl in front of John and smiled coldly. "Eat up," she said sweetly, the falseness of her tone lost on everyone but John. John, exhausted from the day work, lifted his spoon, looking at the food suspiciously. But before he could take a bite, David's hand shot across the table. "That's mine," David barked, his eyes narrowing. "You always get the bigger portion." "David, no!" Agatha's voice for the first time trembled with fear. She reached out to stop him, but David, greedy and impulsive, had already snatched the bowl from John's hand. He began devouring the stew, spoon after spoon, unaware of the doom it held. Agatha's heart sank into her stomach as she watched in horror. "David, stop!" she screamed, her voice raising in desperation. But it was too late. David's face suddenly twisted in pain. His spoon fell to the floor as he clutched his throat, gasping for air. "Mother, can't breathe," he choked, his eyes wide with terror. Agatha rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she tried to help him. "No, no, no," she wailed, her voice breaking as David collapsed to the floor, his body convulsing, vomiting. Within minutes, David was still. His eyes were open, but they no longer saw. Agatha fell to her knee beside him, her tears falling onto his lifeless body. "No, this wasn't supposed to happen," she cried, her voice raw with agony. "It wasn't supposed to be him." John stood frozen, the scene unfolding in slow motion before his eyes. He hadn't fully understood what had happened until now, but seeing David's lifeless form and the guilt across Agatha's face, the terrible truth down to him, she had meant to poison him. At that moment, Henry, weak but alarmed by the noise, staggered into the room, leaning heavily on the doorframe. What's going on here?" he asked, his face pale with concern. His gaze fell on David's body and Agatha wailing beside him. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of confusion and horror. Agatha looked up at him, her face in despair. It wasn't supposed to be this way, Henry, she sobbed. It was supposed to be John. He was supposed to eat the stew, not David. The room fell silent as Henry absorbed the full weight of her words. His leg buckled beneath him and he sank into the chair, staring at Agatha with disbelief and sorrow. You tried to kill my son, he whispered, his voice barely audible. You were going to kill John, he asked. John, standing in the corner, felt a swell of emotion he had never known before. His father's word, though whispered, carried him to a truth he had longed to hear. For so long he had felt invisible, unloved, but now, even in this terrible moment, his father's love broke through the darkness. Father, it's over now, John said softly. We don't have to stay here anymore. Henry looked up at his son, his eyes filled with pain, but also understanding. He nodded weakly, and with John's help, he stood. Together, they walked out of the house, leaving Agatha behind, her wails of grief echoing through the cold, empty halls. As they stepped into the cold night air, John felt a weight lift from his heart. The house that had once been a prison filled with wickedness and darkness was now behind them. For the first time in years, John could see a future, one free of Agatha's hatred, where he and his father could finally begin to heal. And though the journey ahead would not be easy, John knew that with his father by his side, he would find peace. The shadows of the past were long, but the dawn was finally breaking.